Welcome, I'm Rose Martin, and this is Real Life with our very favorite life coach, Susan Harf. You know, Susan gives us tips and strategies for how to navigate those troublesome things in our lives or those things we have questions about. And like you, I can't wait to hear what's on her mind today. Hi, Susan.
Hi, Rose. I'm happy to see you, and I'm so happy that you decided to join us today as well. So today we are talking about a subject that came to us from a couple of viewers, which you know I always love to do. I like to answer people on the air. And the subject that we're calling this, the parents are not listening. But it came to me from two different emails that I got from viewers. And one was an email from a couple whose grandchild has changed religions. And the woman who wrote to me, her mother keeps sending the child Christmas cards and wanting to know why she's not in church. And the child, it's an adult child. She's in her early 20s now. She's made a decision, and it's not like she has no religion. She is very happy in her new religion. But the grandmother will absolutely not acknowledge that. And the adult child is getting more and more angry about that. And the person who wrote me was her mother, saying, what should we do?
Wow, so the mom's in the middle of this because if it's her mother or her mother-in-law and her adult child, so that's a tricky position to be in.
It is, and they're starting to get angry, and so that was one of the letters that came. The other email that came from a young man who is finishing college now. He's in his last year. And he said, so here's my story. He said, I'm gay. I came out recently. My parents still want to know, have I met any nice girls at college? Am I taking a girl to the senior ball? He said, they're still asking me the same questions that they asked before I came out. And he said, I'm very close to my parents, and I'm very, very upset about it because I want them to accept me. And it's very important for me to have my parents' acceptance. My heart broke for him. Mm-hmm. And so I'm talking to both of you today, but I'm also talking to everyone because we all have things in our lives that it seems like sometimes the adults or the relatives in general may not accept.
And you know, what I'm curious about is that it could apply to any situation. So
yes.
These two examples are specific to the viewers who wrote in, but I'm thinking in my own life and in the people that I know, whether, you know, those familiar relationships are tricky and they're oftentimes wrought with, you know, the best of intentions, like you say, we're greeting all this with love, but then how do we navigate the part of when to support, when to back off, when to push our ideas, and you know, that balancing act, Susan, I'm ready for you today.
Well, and we're going to talk about all that because part of what we need to talk about is if we're the ones who aren't accepting, what do we need to do now? How can we move forward with this relationship? So I want to start out by talking about my favorite subject because you know I have two sons and I now have two beautiful daughter-in-laws and I have four grandchildren, excuse me. I forget how many I have. And so I want to talk about the parents who are not accepting of their grandchild or of their, in the second case, their son. I know for me, and I know for everyone I know, and besides my little straw poll, all the people that I have counseled over the years, we as parents begin a story when we know we're going to have a child. That story starts even before the child is born. And the story has to do with who that child is going to be. And so we think about it. We think about it the whole pregnancy. We think about it the moment they're born. We think about it forever. And the story has more to do with what we want for the child than who the child becomes. And it's not as though we ignore who the child becomes, but my point that I want to make is the story starts at the beginning before the child's even born.
So your intention, in a way, when you're going to know you're going to have a baby, that intention starts to form about who they are, what they're going to love, the activities you're going to do, all of it.
That's
so
right.
So whenever they start to veer off of that a little bit,
yeah.
Your natural inclination is to pull them back.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly, Rose. As always, you're such a good life strategist. You figured it out. Okay, so here's what happens. So the parents are pregnant, they're going to have a baby, and they say things like, first of all, the things they say overtly to their friends are, I just want a healthy baby. That's all I want. Please God, I just want a healthy baby. However, that's not all they want, and they don't necessarily know that that's not all they want, because they're thinking, I wonder if he's going to have my flat feet. I hope not. I hope that she becomes a lawyer, because all the women in my family are lawyers. I'd love her to be a lawyer. I hope that she has red hair. Wouldn't that be nice if she had red hair like Grandma? You know, I have a lot of freckles. Maybe she'll get my freckles. Everybody in your family is somebody who loves optics. Maybe she'll be technology. You know, maybe she'll love technology.
Or I've got a big family. Maybe I'm going to have lots and lots of grandchildren.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We start to think about who they might be relative to ourselves, which sounds a bit narcissistic, and it is. And yet it's unavoidable. It's how we think. So, and then it extends to when we have the child, then we say, I just want him to be happy. That's all I want. I want a happy child. And we really believe that. We believe that that's all we want is a happy child, but that's not all we want. We want a happy child who says to us, I'm going to have a career that's going to allow me to have financial freedom. So for instance, I had a client who was a dentist. The reason I saw him at the time I was doing therapy, I wasn't yet doing coaching. The reason I saw he and his wife in therapy was because he wanted to break up the marriage. The reason he wanted to break up the marriage is he wanted to break up his life. The reason he wanted to break up his life is because he didn't want to be a dentist. And it came out in therapy that he went to his parents in dental school. Oh, by the way, all the males in his family were dentists. His father was a dentist, his grandfather was a dentist, his uncles were dentists. He went to his father in dental school and he said, I didn't want to go to dental school. I really want to be an artist. You know that. You pushed me into it. So he's angry at his parents too. And they said, we said you could be an artist, do it on the side. But you can't make a living doing an artist, and we're not going to support you going to art school. That's ridiculous. That was their point. So his life unraveled at a certain time after that. They're no longer married, by the way, and he's still a dentist, and he hates his life.
You know, but that's a lot of pressure to put on the parents even, and guilt afterwards to say, gosh, I didn't want to do this for my life, so now I'm going to blame you for everything that's wrong in my life.
Exactly. So where we need to start as the parent is we need to realize that sometimes the story for the child veers from our story that we thought about before they were born and after they were born. You know, I would love my child to play baseball so that I can be the coach, the father says. Well, the child wanted to be in the plays. He didn't want to be on the baseball field. So at some point, the story is going to diverge from your original plan.
And I'm hearing that he could still coach baseball even if his son's not on the team. If that's one of the goals that he has, to coach a child baseball team, go ahead and do it.
Yeah.
And still support your son in the play.
That's right. However, he wants to play. He wants his
son to
his
play.
Kids.
Yeah.
So the thing is that here's where we start. We start by understanding that this story began a long time ago. And the people who need to understand that story are not just the parents, because they know their story. The adult child has to understand that story, and the other people in their lives have to understand. That does not mean that they don't become who they are. So here's part two. Part one is we got to know that that's what's happening. We have to have that awareness. Part two is, now what do we do? And what we, as the person who's not being accepted. Because one thing I don't believe in is I don't believe in not accepting your child. I believe that you absolutely accept who your child is, even if it's not the story that you wrote. And I say that being a parent, and I say that from having counseled and having coached people since 1980.
And that's a really, really important thing, I think, that people can sit and resonate with for a minute or two, you know?
Yeah. So here's what we need to understand. So let's talk about the adult child who wrote me, who has now come out. He's gay. What I want to say to you, and I want to use this sort of as a metaphor, is that your parents sound like they don't accept you when they say things like, so do you have a girl to, are you dating a girl? Are you planning on getting married to a woman? You know, when they say things like that, it's obvious to him they're not accepting who he is. But what I want you to think about is where this is coming from. And believe it or not, and this is what we need to focus on. We need to focus on the intent. Believe it or not, these parents are in denial, and you know, you've heard me say that denial is not just a river in Egypt. Denial is a coping mechanism. Denial is step one of grief. They are in denial because they are grieving. They're grieving the story that they started before you were born. So one of the things that he has to do is he has to cut them some slack and think about what they're going through. That does not mean that you have to accept that there's something wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you. But you do have to try and understand where they're coming from. And here's where they're coming from. And the reason I'm pointing this out is not because I want to say to you it's not okay to be who you are. I'm not saying that. It is okay to be who you are. I'm saying we need to understand the people who are on the other side, in this case the parents. So one of the things we need to understand is they're afraid. They are afraid of the story. They're afraid because they don't want you to live a life that's going to be difficult for you. And one of the things that you have to know is that your life may be more difficult because of the fact that you're gay. It's not something we want to have happen, but there are homophobic people. There are people who don't accept that. And so the parents are thinking, oh, geez, you know, I don't want that for him.
And sometimes they're afraid of the unknown.
They're afraid.
Because, you know, it doesn't fit into the pattern. It doesn't fit into the story, right?
Exactly.
So then it's like, well, I don't know what's going to happen next, and I thought I had it all planned out. So sometimes I think it might just be fear.
It absolutely is fear. But we want to separate the rational from the irrational. So for instance, if the parents have already decided that the child's not going to heaven because he's gay, that is an irrational fear of theirs. However, if they are concerned that he has a higher propensity of getting AIDS than someone who is not gay, unfortunately, it's a terrible thing. But unfortunately, he does have a higher propensity. He does have it doesn't mean, you know, they shouldn't say to him, are you getting AIDS? No. But, and it sounds like this person also wrote me a lengthy letter. So it sounds like he's very responsible. It sounds like he's very thoughtful, very intelligent. So I'm not afraid that he's getting AIDS. But what I'm saying is the parents don't know enough. And so when they say they're afraid of that, it's coming from a place of fear and love. And so when they say things like, well, if you want a child, it might be harder for you to adopt a child. It's harder for anybody to adopt a child than to give birth to a child, but that does not mean that you won't become a parent. You absolutely can become a parent. But the fears that they have are rooted in something. The fears they have are that somebody's not going to accept him and he's going to have a harder life. And they're right. That may happen. Is that going to happen with everybody? No. Thankfully, no.
So what do you give him in terms of advice if he's saying, you know, my parents aren't listening to me, they're not hearing me,
So
they're not there with me yet?
exactly.
What are the steps to take?
So I'm saying to him, if you begin by trying to understand the points that I just made as to where they're coming from a place of love. Doesn't sound like it, does it? It sounds like they don't accept you, they don't love you. That's a terrible, terrible feeling for anyone to have. Exactly, they're being very judgmental. But I also believe that they are terrified for him because they love him. And the reason that I know they love him is because they keep coming back to him. They keep coming back with, have you tried this? Have you, you know, one of the things that people do when they're grieving, they start out with denial, they move to anger, and then they start bargaining. So they're bargaining with him. They actually said to him, can't you just change just so we can all be happy? Well, okay, no, no. But they're trying to bargain, and that is a normal part of grief.
Right.
It's not rational, but it's a norm. You know, feelings are not irrational or rational. They just are. They're our feelings.
So you're guiding them to helping them to acceptance.
And I want him to not accept that they're not going to love him or not, and I don't want you to accept that there's something wrong with you. No, I want you to accept that they're coming from a place of love. And intent is really important. Intent is always, always important, because you know what? We just got a new white couch. If my grandchild jumps on my couch and he's been outside before he did it, to tell you the truth, I wish he wasn't going to jump on the couch with grassy pants on. But his intent is he's sweet, he's loving, he's adorable, I love him, and the intent is really important there. So am I going to get angry? No, I'm not, because the intent is what is important. So if we can focus on these parents, and for him to focus on these parents, and we can say, you know what, the intent is good, the intent is love, but now we need to help them understand who he really is, and he can help them understand by being who he is, not cutting them out.
Okay, how about for the other story, the one who's in the middle and changed religions and is having trouble?
So one of the other things that happens here is, and this is the narcissistic part, is the rest of it is the loving part. But the narcissistic part is, what does this mean for me? What do I got going on in the stake of this? And so for both of these situations, when somebody else changes, or when somebody else is doing something that diverges from the original story that you had planned, well, that's got consequences for you. And you know, we say, well, Mom and Dad, you're making it about you now. It's not about you, it's about me. But the truth is, they also have to bend, so it is also about them. And we need to afford them the understanding that perhaps their friends at church are going to say, so where's your grandson, or where's your son, or you know, that has implications for them. They need to have the fortitude to say, the child has changed religions, or they're not here. In other words, they don't necessarily owe anybody an explanation for who somebody else is.
Or like you've mentioned in another show, saying, why is that so important to you?
Yeah, I'm wondering
Yeah.
why. I'm wondering,
concerned,
actually use an I statement. Say, I'm wondering why that's so important to you,
Right.
why you feel a need to know that.
Yeah.
So the fact is that it does have ramifications for the parents, because your life's changed, or your life is different, or your life isn't what they thought. That doesn't mean you got to change your life. What it means is we want to understand that yes, it does have ramifications for them. Now I want to, okay, so that's part two. We need to understand the intent, and we need to cut them some slack.
So we've got the story we know, and now we've made it through intent.
Yeah. And now I want to talk about, what do the parents need to do? What do the parents need to do to change? You have an obligation to understand that your relatives, particularly your children, have the right to live their lives in the way that they see fit. So if the child is 10 years old and they don't want to wear a coat, and you're at their house when he's leaving for school, you don't have to say to your adult child, put that coat on him. If your daughter doesn't put the coat on him, zip it. We don't have the right, and my children are going to love, I hope they're watching, because they're going to love hearing me say this, because of course I'm going to say to them, did you hear me? And they're going to say, yeah, why don't you do this? But the truth is that we don't have the right to tell them who to be. And
that's hard, though, Susan. I think people who are watching this are thinking, but you know, my intent, you told me to listen to my intent, and the intent is good. I mean, I want my grandchild not to get sick. I want my daughter or my son to do X, Y, or Z. I mean, my intent is good, so I'm going to just do what I want now anyway, because I've got intent. I've got intent.
Yes. And the intent only carries you to the point of understanding, being understood.
Yeah.
The intent does not carry you to having the right to dictate how your children are going to live. And you know what? We're all in this. Anybody who's a parent understands what I'm talking about. And so, you know, it brings me back to the days when I was a very young therapist and trying to listen to people's problems and giving advice. And you don't have to jump off a bridge to know how it feels. I really believe that. My pediatrician did not have children, and he was a wonderful pediatrician. But there are some things that are better understood if you've gone through it. And so the person who I'm saying you need to understand is your child. And you have gone through it. You are the parent of that person. So we don't have the right to dictate how their story is going to be lived or how it's going to end. And that's the other part of this. I don't want anyone who's part of this story, the parents, the other relatives, the grandparents, or the adult child, to make a definitive conclusion about how it's going to end. Because once we decide, I'm not talking to them anymore, or once we decide they're not listening, so I can't get through to them, so I'm going to hang up, that is a decision that does not need to be made in the now. Instead, what I want you to say is, my parents are going to come around because they're going to get to know me, they're going to get to know my partner or my husband or whoever it is, and they're going to love them too.
And I think that's important because if we all approach that with love and good intent, then we can get that outcome we want. I mean, and they can still dream and they can still wish and they can still do whatever, but just not to be so vocal about it. I know I have a good friend who has 3 adult sons, and she might want to be a grandma and have the boys find a loving partner. But she's brilliant because she doesn't berate them. You know, she's not saying constantly,
thankfully.
when is it going to happen? When is it going to happen? Instead, greets them with open arms and accepts whatever, you know, whatever path they're on.
She's wonderful. I'd like to meet her. But here, let's now talk about the person who doesn't do that. Let's talk about the parent who is saying, when are you going to give me my grandchildren? When, you know, all of that. So you wonder why, when you're my client, you wonder why they don't want to be with you. Well, here's why they don't want to be with you. Because you bring up things that upset them.
That's very direct.
So the thing is, what we need to do is, if you're still in that stage of we're not getting along or we're not seeing eye to eye, then here are some things you can do. You call them up and you say, I want to see you. Is it okay with you if you come over for brunch? In other words, it's a specific time. It's not going to last all day, except if you're us, we eat all day when we have brunch. But chances are it's not going to last all day. Or can I come to the child's baseball game? Or in other words, make a specific time. And it wouldn't hurt to ask your kids, how do you want me to connect with you? Would you prefer that I email you first? Do you want me to call you? Do you just want me to drop over? No. How do you want me to engage with you? People love to be asked, what do you want? And especially your children. So you tell me how to engage with you. And it's okay to say, you know, I love babysitting for you, but I would love to be with you when I'm not babysitting for the kids. I'd love to be with all of you. There are ways that you can get across your point and still be heard and not be aggressive. And if you are the adult child, there are ways for you to get across your point. And the way is to say, Mom, I love you, but I gotta go. That's what my child said to me the other day. I was on the phone with him. He was at work. He said, Mom, I love you to pieces, but it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon. My client's waiting, gotta go. Now, you know what? My client was going to be waiting too, but I had a minute for him. So the point is that the parent has to be the one to understand. The parent has to be the one to model the behavior that's going to say, that's okay with me, that's perfectly okay. Because you know what? We want them to have their own life. So when the story diverges from what it is you thought was going to happen, focus on the things that are really good. Focus on the values that you taught them that they have. This adult child who wrote me, he's got wonderful values. He talked to me about how he loves his parents, he wants their approval. You know what? Every child wants the parents' approval, even if the parents are not here anymore. We never stop wanting that. And it doesn't matter how old we are, it doesn't matter how mature we are, doesn't matter what relationships we go on to have with our own families, the families that we create.
Or how we drive each other crazy along the way, along our life's journey.
Exactly, exactly. So we still want that. So I'm here to say that we all have work to do when it comes to evening out this playing field. We have to know that our children have the right to have their own lives. We also have the right to an opinion. But the fact is that if the opinions are about how they're leading their lives, unless they tell you, I want that opinion from you, don't give it.
I
Don't- you
love
know-
that. I love that, Susan, because I think what in all of the conversation we've said, okay, find out what the story is first before you go. Assume the good intent, and then make your actions something that are loving and respectful, and know when, you know what, you need to zip it, like you just said. That's amazing. So I hope everybody today has gotten a great insight into how we can not only listen, but be the listeners, no matter what side of that coin you find yourself on, right?
Exactly. And we are that person no matter whether we're the person that has diverged or the person who set the story in the first place. It does not matter.
Thank you. Special thanks to our favorite life coach, Susan Harf, for giving us insights and strategies for how we can navigate adult relationships for ourselves, for our kids, and even for those that we come into contact with all the time. For Susan Harf, for Real Life, I'm Rose Martin. Please join us again next time.